Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to today's Caffeine for the Soul. And before we get started, if you enjoy the things that we talk about each week on this podcast, I want you to consider joining our Inner Circle Platinum, or as we call it, the I'm All In, Let's Do This Club. And somebody once described the Inner Circle Platinum as a satsang on steroids. But for me, I think of it as a place where people who are interested in going deeper into this inside-out understanding can do it over the course of a year with fellow explorers in lots of different ways. There's workshops, there's monthly webinars, there's videos, and it's just a chance if you really want to get this, and if you already get this and want to really implement it into your life, check out the Inner Circle Platinum, and you can find it at michaelneill.org/Inner Circle. So if you have listened to me before, it may have come up that I kind of am ever so slightly obsessed with golf. And what comes with that obsession is a lot of advice. And actually, there's an extraordinary amount of advice. If you just type how to play golf into the internet, I think you'll never come out. But I've recently come across a golfing philosophy that actually aligns very much with my own understanding about how people do really well at whatever it is that they do really well at. And it's called the easiest swing. And you can type easiest swing in and you'll find them. But one of the things that they talk about, and I just loved how they talk about, because for me it was sort of a whole new way of thinking about positivity, is they talk about how most people, when they're learning something new, ignore what works and just focus in on what doesn't work and try to improve that. But what they say is if you flip that and just accept, look, a bunch of what you do is not going to work while you're learning and even after you've learned. But everything that works, stop, sit with it, replay it, get that feel for what it's like when it works into you before you move on. And so for me, when I started, applying that next time I went out and played golf, I quickly found out two things. And the first was, man, do I not do that habitually? Like, my habit is, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? Why is that wrong? Okay, how do I fix it? But the other thing I noticed that was slightly more surprising is how much I enjoyed my game when I focused on what worked instead of what didn't. Now, that might sound screamingly obvious to you, and in retrospect it kind of was. But I didn't really know it until I experienced it. And so what I've sort of realized is, I somehow picked up the cultural notion that if you want to get better at something, focus on what's not working. And the way it works is if it's two steps. Step one, if something works, you don't need to pay attention to it. And two, if something doesn't work the way it's supposed to, including you, your job is to figure out why it didn't work and do everything you can to correct it or fix it or solve the problem. Here's the problem. That strategy keeps us focused on what doesn't work. It keeps us focused on problems instead of what we actually want to create. And our focus, our attention works like a magical magnifying glass. And it makes everything you look at just appear larger and more significant than it probably is. In fact, my wife's summary of my book, The Inside Out Revolution, she said, I really enjoyed this, but it's kind of a basic idea, isn't it? And I was like, well, okay, I don't know. What's the idea? And she said, well, you're basically saying that, we use thought to turn molehills into mountains. And I was like, yeah, we do. We use this magical magnifying glass of attention, of thought, to expand things until they look huge. And I call it magical because the longer you keep the magnifying glass of attention on whatever you're focusing on, the amplification increases. So the more you focus on what's wrong with you, with life, with other people, with the world, the larger and more detailed and subtler problems you'll start to pick up on, until I mean, my way of thinking about it is like you go from having a sore shoulder to being convinced you're dying of a rare blood disorder you looked up on Google. I've never actually done that. Maybe I have. Or you're like, you feel a bit insecure about your looks. And then the more you pay attention to that, the more you realize you're actually hideously deformed and you need plastic surgery on every bit of you except your ankles. You've got lovely ankles. Now, here's a sort of an analogy for it. So imagine you live in a drafty house with a beautiful fireplace. And it's kind of cold in the house, but by the fire, it's amazing. So you build a fire and you're sitting by the fire and it's beautiful. And you're about to settle in for a lovely evening by the fire with a glass of wine and your beloved at your side, when you feel just a little bit of a draft from the windows over to the side of the house. Now, you know you could leave it, but you decide you really want to enjoy the evening by the fire. And it would be so much easier to do that if there wasn't the draft. So you tell your sweetheart, hang on, honey, I'm just going to go over and shut the window. And you go over to the window, but it won't quite shut because it's kind of warped from the rain. So you go to get a file from the part of the house where you keep your tools so you can file it down. It'll fit nice and tight and snug. And on your way to get the file, you notice there's another window in the hall that's had a hole in it you've been meaning to fix, and you decide you'd better tape it up because that's probably letting in cold air as well. But when you get the tape, you remember there's a few other things you've been planning to work on, and as long as you're fixing shit, you may as well take care of them all at once. And then once everything's resolved, you're going to be able to really relax and just enjoy being with your beloved. Well, by the time you've got everything fixed, you come back into the living room, and the fire's gone out. And your beloved is gone. Now, here's the reverse of that. Like if we deliberately use positivity, the magical magnifying power of attention, to focus on what we actually want more of in our lives, it might go more like this. So imagine that you live in a drafty house with a beautiful fireplace. And it's kind of cold in the house, but by the fire, it's amazing. So you build a fire, and you're sitting by the fire, and it's beautiful, and you're about to settle in for a lovely evening by the fire with a glass of wine and your beloved at your side, when you feel just a little bit of a draft from the window over to the side of the house. Now, you know you could leave it, so you do, because you really want to enjoy the evening by the fire with your beloved. The feeling of warmth and connection between you fills your mind and heart with love and good feelings. So you keep your attention on those feelings as you and your beloved while the night away. Insecure, distracting thoughts come up from time to time about problems with the house and the big deadline coming up at work, but you ignore them, choosing instead to use your magnifying glass to be exactly where you are. You're having the time of your life, and wonderful memories of other beautiful days and evenings pour into your mind, and while it's tempting to lose yourself in them, you once again bring your attention back to the moment you're in and the person you're with. And the magic magnifying glass of attention expands the moment so wide that you feel as though you could never get lost in thought again. You and your beloved fall asleep in each other's arms, and all is right with your world. And that's, for me, a whole new way of thinking about positivity, not as a good idea or a naive New Age concept, but as a practical use of the magical magnifying power of your own attention, your own power to think, to create more of what you actually want to have in your world. Have fun, learn heaps, happy exploring, and I'll talk with you soon.